Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Hello, Shalom Aleichem. Welcome back to today's Daf Hayomi, Meseches CHULLIN Daf Lamed Gimel. We begin 6 lines from the top. Amar of Acha Bar Yaakov. He teaches us like this: Shma mina midrab Shimon ben Lakish. We can deduce from Shimon ben Lakish's halacha, which we learned yesterday, which was that once the trachea has been severed, so anything attached to it is also, by extension, considered severed, detached, disconnected from the animal. For instance, let's say the lungs, which are hanging off the trachea, get punctured after the trachea had been cut. No harm is done because it's out of the way. It's been detached, disconnected from the animal. And even though he hadn't yet completed the shechita, he just did one tube, one kana. That kana and anything that's connected to it is now detached, out of the way. And anything that happens to that section, let's say a puncture that occurs with the lung, is irrelevant. Although that's something which typically would render the animal a treifa. Yeah, that's before the shechita started. But once the shechita started and the kana and anything connected to the kana had been disconnected from the animal, it's out of the way, it's out of the equation. Comes Rav Acha Bar Yaakov and takes it a step further. Shema mina, we can learn midrab Shimon Lakish from that halacha, which teaches us that once the windpipe had been severed, the kana and all its trimmings are now disconnected, out of the way. Mezamnin Yisrael al bnei me'ayim, ve'en mezamnin oili kechavim al bnei me'ayim. Now this halacha is based on an interesting distinction between the way Bnei Yisrael eat their meat and lahadol l'goyim. By both, one may not eat aver min hachai, a limb of a living being. So a live animal is usher for both Yisrael and the goy. But what is permissible? What is the process that makes it mutter for consumption? So it depends. By Yisrael, it's about shechita. We have a mitzvah, v'zavachta v'shachata, right? We make a bracha, shekidishana, right? Allah shechita. Once shechita has been applied to the animal is not permissible. Even though it's still, exhibiting some sort of, signs of life, it's still floundering, it's still... The shechita affects that transformation. It changes it from a living being to food for consumption. However, by the guy, who doesn't have a mitzvah of shechita, by him it's just about, is it alive or not? So over there, he must wait until it fully expires and loses all signs of life. Shechita was done. The animal is still mifar cheses, that's the term that the Gemara uses to describe the animal which is still exhibiting signs of somewhat. By the Yisrael it's mutter. What? Because shechita had already been applied. It's a shechted animal, it's mutter. Its main life force has been terminated, and that's what changes it from live to meat. Whereas by a goy, he doesn't have the formal act of shechita to relate to. And thus he has to wait until it's fully mesa. Okay, now what about the bnei me'ayim, the lungs that are attached to the kana, which had been severed? So he severed the kana as part of the shechita, hadn't completed the shechita yet. The lungs and all that, it's been severed now. By Yisrael, that's not an issue, because it was severed as part of the shechita, which is that formal sort of transformative process which changes it from alive to... So it's mutter for Yisrael to eat that. Whereas by a guy, it's perhaps different, because this limb, this part of the animal had been detached while the animal It was still alive. Hadn't yet fully expired. It was mid-process, mid-shchita, which to the guy has no relevance. By him it's about live or dead. It's not yet dead, so it was detached during the animal's lifetime, so to speak. It was mid-shchita process, but still alive, as far as the guy is concerned. Ultimately, that's considered Eiver Menachai for a guy. It came off while the animal was technically still alive, or I should say not dead. Interesting chiddush. Mizhamnan Yisrael, you can invite a fellow Yid, Abnei Mayim, to join you and eat the innards of the animal, the lungs. But not a guy, you can't eat it. My time. Oh, the Gemara explains itself. What's the difference? Very simple. Yisrael by a Yid, the b'shchita talia milsa by a Jew, it's about shchita or non-shchita. Here was shchita. That made this detachment. Given the ikar shchita malisa, since it was part of the shchita. This connection occurred as part of the shchita. Ishtrilu. The animal's fully mutter, including this part as well. It experienced shchita. But by the goy, where it's not about shchita, it's about death, which hasn't yet arrived at that early point in the game. By the goy, nechira is enough, just pulling out the tubes. It's not about the formal act of shchita, it's about whether the animal is mesa. But misa tali musa, it's about misa. So it depends whether it was alive or not. Hani said these innards, which had been removed, so to speak, from the animal during its lifetime, ke'ever nachai damu. They have a status of ever nachai, a piece of a living being. You can't eat it. And although ultimately the animal was shechted, but it doesn't matter because at that stage, the animal was still technically alive. Amar Papa. Says Rav Papa, I was sitting and listening to this halacha from Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Hav Yasivna kamed Rav Acha bar Yaakov. I was sitting before him and listening to him, and it rang interesting. He says, like, Uboy de Emalei, I wanted to sort of challenge him by saying, look, that's an irony. How could you say that, Yisrael are meant to have higher standards than a guy? We're holier. How can there be something which is okay for us and not okay for them? Mi kamidi. Can you have a situation, the Yisrael Shari, it should be okay for a Yid to eat because it's considered shechted, it's asr? I had it on the tip of my lips, but I didn't say it. I didn't respond to him. I didn't, challenge him. Why? I saw that he had an opinion and it was substantiated, at least in his point of view, so I wasn't going to give him a hard time. I figured, look, he's giving us a reason, and even if I don't fully absorb it, but it's not grounds for challenging. So it was on the tip of my tongue to say, but I refrained from saying it. But in fact, we have a brisa that disagrees with Rav Acha bar Yaakov's distinction. Tanya, the loik Rav Acha bar Yaakov. We have a brisa which allows even a guy to have this piece of meat. We'll see in a minute that it was eaten for health purposes. It had medicinal properties. To grab that piece of meat off the animal before it fully expired, after shechita, but before fully expiring. A lively piece of meat which has extra, So if a person wants to access that, how does he do it? A person wants to consume a piece of the behema, which was removed before the animal fully expired. We'll see in a minute. Actually, you can't eat it yet. You have to wait until the animal fully expires. Rashi brings the pasuk, al hadam. You can't eat it while the animal's still, exhibiting some signs of life. But it's all about when it was detached. You want to detach it early enough so that the piece of meat has that extra property. How do you do it? You rip off, cut off a piece of basar, right at the place of shechita, which is accessible. You salt it very well. You rinse it very well. Rashi says because it still hadn't drained from its blood. You have to wait until the animal fully expires, and then you can eat it. And it's okay for us and for them. Everybody can eat it. There's no distinction. After all, it was taken off the animal during the act of shechita, and it's not considered Eiver Menachai. Okay, this is going to be a riot to Rabbi Bar Avin, who likewise allows this for even a guy. Rabbi Bar Avin, Rabbi Bar Ashyon, so a person is concerned about health matters and he wants to have this unique piece of meat. Again, you access that place where you can the makam shchita, umalcha yafa yafa, madicha yafa yafa, you salt it, you rinse it well. Okay, you wait until the animal fully expires, and then you have the green light, whether he's a guy or a yid. Ultimately, it's not considered Eivim Menachai. Okay, so it's interesting machlokes between Rav Acha bar Yaakov and Rabbi Bar Avin, supported by the Brisa. Rav Acha bar Yaakov was based on Rish Lakish, who says that once the kana and its trimmings are detached during the act of shechita, they're sort of out of the way. So he took it a step further, that by a guy, where shechita, the formal act of shechita, is not really a factor at play. So by him, it's about did it die or not? It didn't die yet. So since it had been removed pre-death, the piece of meat now has a status like Eivim Menachai. The Gemara disagrees. If it's okay for us because it was removed as part of the shechita process, it's not called Eivim Menachai, and likewise for the goy. Continues the Mishnah. Okay, hashechet behema v'chai v'oif v'liyotzim hen dam. He shechter behema or chaya on oif, and there's no draining of blood. The animal did not bleed out. Ksher, the animal is fully permissible. The Mishnah seems to indicate that even without the exiting of the dam, the animal will still die because he severed that vital connection, the tubes. Now, since it had no dam, one shouldn't hesitate to consume this material with unclean hands, without washing his hands. Typically, unwashed hands, even without having really experienced direct tumah contact, midrabanan, they're considered shniyos. They have the lower level of tumah, right? There's rishon the tumah, then comes below that is sheni the tumah, below that is shlish the tumah. The Chachamim considered unwashed hands as sheni the tumah, but in this case, there's no issue because in order for some food item to become tummy, it has to go through the hechsher process. To complete it, to enable it for tumah by getting rinsed, coming into contact with liquids. But in this case, since there was no blood contact with the meat is immune to any tumah. Since the behema, the animal here, did not experience hechsher by way of contact with blood, there was no blood. He disagrees. He says even though there was no blood, the absence of blood does not prevent it from becoming huchshar. Rashi explains, look, the shechita now transformed it from an animal into flesh, into meat, into edible material. That upgrades it into a status of food, makes it food material, completes its process, and makes it open for tumah as well. Okay, Tanakama says you have to actually come into contact with liquid, which didn't happen in this case. Only that completes the process, makes it a complete food, susceptible to tumah. Shimon says, the formal act of shechita is a very transformative act, which on its own will achieve that status of food. Says the Gemara, clearly the issue here is because of the blood. So the basar is spared of any tumah because of lack of blood. But suppose there is blood there. You can't eat it with unclean hands. What's the problem? Amai, what's the issue? Yodayim, at most, unwashed hands are shniyos, they're sheni l'tumah. Now, sheni l'tumah can only affect teruma. Teruma has higher standards, it's more delicate, more sensitive. But otherwise, if it's just plain material, CHULLIN, which we assume the Mishnah is talking about, so a sheni l'tumah wouldn't affect it. What's the issue altogether? Sheni oisa shlishi b'CHULLIN. Hands which are sheni cannot transmit further to make a shlishi l'tumah if it's merely CHULLIN. And that's what we're talking about in the Mishnah. How do we know? How do we know we're speaking about CHULLIN material? I have 4 proofs. First of all, the Tani Chaya. Mishnah makes reference to an animal being shechted, and an animal can only be chulin. Dilu kachim, if it's karbonos, chaya, an animal by kachim, do we have a chaya by kachim? We certainly don't. Number 2, Vesu, furthermore, iba kachim, if we're discussing karbonos, even in absence of blood, the carbon would still be susceptible to tumah. Kilo yotzim hendam ksherin. Oh, sorry, that was the next kasha. But this kasha is, look, how could you say that a carbon will still be kosher without blood? Again, Vesu, furthermore, iba kachim, if the Mishnah is speaking about a carbon, how can you allow it through without blood? That's the whole purpose. The whole objective is to extract its blood, to put on the mizbeach. Without blood or kosher, his whole objective is to drain the blood to put on the mizbeach. Furthermore, next kasha, if we're talking about a carbon, even if there is blood, that blood have the hechsher effect? Certainly doesn't. It's not considered one of the primary liquids if it's carbon blood. How do we know? How do we know that blood of a carbon doesn't have the ability to affect hechsher? Shenamar, the pasuk, in describing blood with water, which teaches us that just as water can be machsher, fruit and food for tumah, likewise blood, pasuk describes the blood as follows: Shenamar ala oretz tishbechenu kamayim. Spill it out on the oretz, just like water. That blood is equated to water with respect to the ability to be machsher. Dam shenishbach kamayim, ordinary blood, which you spill out just like machsher, that's a machsher. But dam of a carbon, which has a different purpose, different function, it's meant for the mizbeach, it's not going to be poured out like that. Dam she'ena nishbach kamayim eina machsher, will not be machsher in any case. Fourth proof that the Mishnah is not discussing karbanis v'su, furthermore, if in fact it's a carbon that we're talking about, so you mean without blood there's no hechsher? That's untrue. The very fact that it has that endearment, it's carbon material, that in itself grants it higher status. That grants it food status to the extent that it's going to be open for tumah. Now we're talking about even about non-food items. Rashi brings eitzim lavoina, firewood, incense, even though they're not really food, but they're carbon material, that in itself grants it sort of a status of food with respect to being open to tumah. So even without a proper formal hechsher process, even without the meat touching liquid, the fact that it's carbon material, that opens it for tumah. The Kamalan, as we know, chibas ha-kodesh, machshartan, the endearment of kodesh, the higher standard, the fact that it's carbon material, that gives it the ability to receive tumah. That makes it a complete and finished item with respect to tumah. So we have a total of 4 proofs to confirm that the Mishnah is not talking about karbanos. What then? We're assuming regular CHULLIN material. Now regular CHULLIN material has nothing to worry about if his hands are merely a sheni l'tumah. So what's the issue in the Mishnah? Says the Gemara, you know what? It's not chulin or karban. It's somewhere in the middle, somewhere in between. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Ravua, Hocha b'chulin shelachon b'keser masa askinen. We're not speaking about chulin or karban. We're talking about maser sheni material. So it was chulin, regular animal, purchased with maser sheni money, which grants it slightly higher status than regular chulin, which makes it susceptible to a sheni l'tumah. And that's the case in the Mishnah. Unlike Rameir, who disagrees with that upgrade, that's not as we have in the Mishnah. We turn to the base. Kol haton bios mayim b'divrei seifim. Rashi explains, Kol haton bios mayim means something which technically min ha-Torah is not tummy. Only b'divrei seifim, which are the rabbanim. For instance, unwashed hands, which is one of the items mentioned back in Maseches Shabbos over there with the 18 gzeros, right? So one of which is the Yodayim, Stam Yodayim, by the way, that's why we wash our hands before we eat, in recognition of this concern. So, unwashed hands must be washed before interacting with these materials. And otherwise, Mitame es HaKodesh. If you don't wash your hands, the hands are considered Sheni l'tumah, and they are Mitame Kodesh. So as we explained before, there are different levels in terms of tumah susceptibility. We have plain material, which is chulin, that can only go up until sheni l'tumah. A truma which is of a higher stature, more delicate, more fragile, that can go all the way to a shlishi. So even if it touches a sheni, it also becomes disqualified. Kodesh, which is carbon material, that goes a step further due to its heightened level of kedusha, which we know corresponds to tumah, right? It's a parallel system. So the higher you are, the holier you are, the more delicate you are, the more susceptible you are, the more sensitive you are to even a more minute degree of tumah, right? So kodesh, which is exposed to a sheni l'tumah, becomes tummy. Tummy means that it becomes so tummy that it can transmit it further. So the sheni hands touch the kodesh, they become a shlishi, which in turn make a revi'ah. Upaislas truma. Truma, as we said, is one drop below that. It only goes maximum until shlishi. So when you have your hands which are sheni, you touch the truma, they become pasal. Pasal means it stops there, it gets disqualified, but it doesn't pass it on further. Umurter b'chulin u'b'maser, but he's okay with touching chulin or maser. The Rebbe Meir Shita, he considers maser on the same level as chulin in this respect. They say no. Maser will become affected by a sheni l'tumah. Okay, so the Mishnah is speaking about maser. And therefore, unwashed hands, which are sheni, present a concern. So it's not plain chulin, which would be immune to a sheni. We're not talking about carbon, as we had proved repeatedly. We're talking about something between the maser. Maskevod Rav Sim Bar Ashi, I have a question on you. How do you know that Rabbanan would consider maser vulnerable to sheni touching them? How do you know? Dilma adkan loy pligi Rabban oled Rameir. Maybe Rabban only disagree with Rameir. Maybe they only hold their position ela b'achilas maser. Regarding eating maser, a person on his own is a sheni, he shouldn't be eating maser. But touching maser, which is a low-level interaction, aval b'negia de maser. But regarding touching maser, sheni, v'achila de chulin, even eating chulin, loy pligi. Maybe they're in total agreement. There's no machlekes there. Right? And that's exactly what our Mishnah is talking about. We're talking about touching, merely touching. Who says that's an issue according to Rabban? And our Mishnah is discussing this very point of touching. But look at the Mishnah. It says, there's no blood. Don't worry about what? It can be eaten with unclean hands. The Mishnah is not speaking that he's eating it himself, perhaps. He's feeding it to somebody else. Realize again, perhaps was speaking because Safi lechavrei, that his friend is feeding him with his unclean hands. So the person actually eating it is fully pure, fully tar. We're allowing Reuben to handle the material with his unclean hands in order to feed Shimon. So if that's the case, the Mishnah is talking about merely physical contact. Who's to say that's an issue, even if it's maser? So again, back to the question. The hands are unwashed. They're sheni, at most, right? We're assuming. We're going to change that in a minute. Unwashed hands are merely sheni. So you touch chulin, it's not an issue. Carbon, we're not talking carbon. Maser, who says that's an issue? If you don't go into Rabbanon. El Amar Papa, let me explain to you. The Mishnah is talking with hands that are really tamei on a high level. They're rishon l'tumah. Tchilos means it's the beginning of the chain. It's the rishon l'tumah. B'yadayim tchilos haskina. And yadayim that are rishon will even be metame chulin. Okay, so we're just talking about a regular chulin animal, which can be affected by rishon hands. And whose opinion is reflected in our Mishnah? Reb Shimon ben Elazar, who clearly says that these types of hands will affect even chulin. Despite the fact that, as we're going to see later, it's only with the Rabbanon. Whenever we speak, by the way, about just hands being tamei, it's only with the Rabbanon, because in Torah, you touch something, the entire body is affected. We're talking about a phenomenon which only affects the hands. For instance, if a person runs his hands into the airspace of a home that had a nega, he didn't fully go in there. That would affect his whole body. He just stuck his hands in. The Chachamim, out of concern that it might lead to full entry, applied a tumah to his hands, and his hands only. So he has to wash them, he has to rinse them, right? He has to do tefillah, asanya, ein yodayim tchilas, the CHULLIN. According to Tanakh, there's no concept of yodayim being rishon regarding CHULLIN. Reb Shimon Elazar, yes. Sure, what's Ramei yodayim tchilas, the CHULLIN? There could be a situation that yodayim are considered tchilas, rishon l'tumah, even regarding CHULLIN. Okay, so that's the case in our Mishnah. Hands were tchilas, were rishons, and we're dealing with touching CHULLIN, which would be an issue, theoretically. Barring the fact that there was no hechsher. Okay. And he continues, Shniyos l'truma. So yodayim are called tchilas regarding CHULLIN, and they're called shniyos, they're considered like a shein l'tumah with respect to truma. Ask the Gemara, hold it, truma is more susceptible, more delicate, more fragile than CHULLIN. How can we be more lenient in truma than CHULLIN? Tchilos, you're considering the hands to be rishon only l'CHULLIN, only for that, but l'truma no, loy? How could you say that? He means like this. Tchilos af l'CHULLIN, when in fact the hands are considered rishon, they're rishon even regarding CHULLIN. However, shniyos, in situations where they're not rishon, different case, let's say they're unwashed, they're regarded as a sheni, then it's only l'truma in the CHULLIN, only with respect to truma, due to its heightened state of holiness, but not the truma in the CHULLIN loy. Okay, so we resolved our issue because the Mishnah is talking about these types of hands, which are rishon l'tumah, which can theoretically impact even CHULLIN, which is the subject matter of our Mishnah. Ask the Gemara, how do you get hands that are tchilas? How do you get hands which are rishon l'tumah? And yeah, here's the case: the sanyo, the snan, hichnas yadav beis hamanuka, he stuck his hands into a home which is a nega. Yadav tchilas. The Rebbe Kiva considers his hands to be rishon. No, they say the hands are merely a shein l'tumah. So all agree they're a tameh. The question is to what extent. Now, what's the machlekes about? Kuli alma, all agree. Min ha-Torah, there is no tumah applicable. Biyah b'miktzas, because partial entry, like this fellow was merely dangling his hands into the airspace of the room. Lo yishma biyah, it's not considered a proper entry, meaning the body, the person is not tameh min ha-Torah. Here it's just midrabanan, because one thing might lead to the next. But gzeira, there's a concern yadav. Once the hands are in atugufa, it might lead to his body going in, and therefore a tumah was applied to the hands in this case. The question is, what level, what severity of tumah did they apply to the hands? Was it a brand new type, which typically doesn't exist elsewhere? Meaning, did they give it the status of rishon l'tumah, or did they give it just a standard, universal, din of yadayim, which are the unwashed hands, with the shein l'tumah? So they applied that here as well. Kamifli, that's the machlekes. Mar savar yodav kigufa shavin rabbanon. One says, Rebbe Kiva holds. In this case, although it wasn't his full body that entered, just his hands. But since the concern was that one could lead to the other, they already granted the hands the same status as though he fully entered, which means a rishon l'tumah. Umar Savar, the other shita says no, not to that extent. Yodayim k'yodayim da'alma, they gave the hands the same status as regular hands, unwashed hands. Shavin and Rabbanan, that's what the Rabbanan consider them, which means a shein l'tumah. Okay. So again, we resolve the question. The Mishnah, which is concerned about unclean hands, is speaking about not just plain, undefined, stam yadayim, which are considered shniyos. Rather, they are rishon l'tumah, tchilos, due to the fact that they were inserted into a bayis hamanuga, which makes them a rishon midrabanan, and it's in accordance with Reb Shimon Elazar, who says that hands in this state can affect even CHULLIN. Now, interestingly, we just quoted Rebbe Kiva as well, who seemed to say the same thing. Yadav tchilas, right? The Rebbe Kiva. So why did we insist on aligning our Mishnah with Rebbe Shimon Elazar rather than Rebbe Kiva, who's the grand, source for Torah Shabbat Peh? Rashi says Stam Mishnayos are in accordance with Rebbe Kiva, who was their Rebbe, who was Rebbe Meir's Rebbe, Rebbe Yudin. Well, like Rebbe Kiva, why didn't we align our Mishnah with Rebbe Kiva? Damahu, who likewise tells us Yodav Tchilos Havyan, that the hands in this case are Tchilos. Well, it says the Gemara, there's another aspect to consider. which is that Dilma Kikamar Rakiva. It's true that Rakiva considered them Rishon, but perhaps only with respect to more sensitive materials. Hanibi, that's only applicable but Truma, the Kachim, the Chamiri, Truma and Kachim that were touched with these hands, they're more strict, they're more stringent. Aval Chulin Shnias Havin, but perhaps when it comes to Chulin material, as per our Mishnah, which is speaking about Chulin, perhaps these hands are not considered like Rishon. Rather, they're only like Sheni, and Sheni cannot affect Chulin. Hold it, they could. According to Rakiva, they could. Ironically, according to Rakiva, suppose they're only shnias. Okay. Still, they will affect Chulin. It so happens that we know that Rakiva holds, the Amar says, Sheni, even a Sheni can generate a Shlishi by Chulin. It's not, we have a Mishnah to this effect. On that very day, this was when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah took over the mantle of leadership. So they opened the doors wide, all the Talmidim, many that had not been admitted previously were now allowed entry, and there was a lot of discussion, a lot of clarification. On that day, Rakiva taught by first quoting the pasuk Kol Klicheres. We're talking about a Klicheres which has a visitor. Sheretz was dangled into the airspace of the Klicheres. Now the Sheretz is an Avatuma, source of Tumah, which makes the Klicheres a Rishon Tumah, which in turn transmits Tumah to the loaf of bread, which is now dangling in the airspace as well. And the pasuk says, anything that was inserted, Kol Shabbosaycha Yitma, instead of saying just Tumah, it says Yitma. Tumah Le'nemar, rather than just saying it becomes Tumah. Because the Sheretz is an Avhatuma, Klicheres is a Rishon, now the loaf is a Sheni, which would indicate that it stops there. No, it doesn't say that. It doesn't stop there. Le'nemar, Ela Yitma, with a Yud, which can be read like Yitami. It continues on. The Sheni can transmit further and make a Shlish, even by Chulin. To infect others. Limit, we learn from here, Al Kikar Sheni, this loaf of bread, which is merely a Sheni Latuma, Shois a Shlishi B'Chulin, can make even a Shlishi by Chulin. That's what Rakiva is speaking. So let's say, at worst case, these hands are merely Shniyos, Midrabanon. Let them affect Chulin as well, according to Rakiva. Says perhaps when Rakiva says a Sheni can generate a Shlishi, it's only when the Tumah has been a Torah. And that could go on and make a Shlishi al b'drabanan loy, but here it's only a Tumah d'Rabbanan. The hands that were inserted in the Bais HaMenuga, etc. So, who's to say it can actually generate a Shlishi by Chulin? Hence, we aligned our Mishnah with Rav Shimon Elazar, who clearly specifies that these types of hands are considered Rishon L'Tumah even regarding Chulin. Hence, the halacha in our Mishnah. Okay, so again, in our Mishnah we learn Shchita with the absence of blood is still a Shchita, and now it carries no concern, no risk of becoming Tameh. You could eat it, you can handle it with Yadayim and Su'avais, unclean hands. There's no Hechsher. Now, why would there be a concern? Hands which are merely unwashed are Sheni, they can't affect Chulin. And we're not speaking about Korbanis. Meiser Sheni, that's a whole discussion, that's not so clear. The answer is, we're speaking about Yodayim that are Rishon L'Tumah, they were inserted into Bais HaMenuga, which according to Shimon Elazar can impact now the Chulin by interacting with Chulin. And that's the case of our Mishnah. Here comes another solution to the question. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Yeshua. You know what the issue in our Mishnah is? Hacha b'chulin shenasu ataras hakodesh askina. Sure, we're speaking about regular hands, unwashed hands, stam yadayim, which are treated like a sheni l'tumah d'Rabbanan. Okay, if you're interacting with merely chulin, what's the issue? It's not plain standard chulin. We're talking hacha b'chulin shenasu, which are being treated al taras hakodesh, with the kodesh standards. Rashi explains it was common for kehanim who regularly would eat karbanos or truma to customize themselves, to habitualize themselves, to keep to the higher standard and be free of tumah regarding their foodstuff. So they would protect, they would guard, they would treat their regular food, even chulin food, as though it was truma. They gave it the truma standard. They gave it the kodesh standard. And interestingly, Rashi back on the Beis, when Beis tells us he has to adhere to that commitment. It's like a neder. It's a kabbalah. He obligates himself to treat all his foods on higher standards. And that's what we're talking about. Chulin, regular food, shenasu ataras hakodesh haskin, are being treated like karbanis. Oh, if that's the case, that even unwashed hands, shein l'tumah, will be metame the basar, barring the fact that they had no hechsher l'tumah. That's the case of our Mishnah. With like Rabbi Shua, now we must mention that this is not going to be like Rabbi Shua, who says that you can't possibly upgrade chulin to the status of kodesh. You can't do this artificial upgrade. It doesn't work. Only to the extent of truma. You can upgrade it like truma and treat it like truma, but not to the extent of kodesh. That's his opinion, which is sort of a side point here. The main point we already addressed. We solved the Mishnah. What's the issue? It's tam yadayim, but we're talking about chulin, which is being treated like kodesh, which will become tamei by these hands. This time we have a Mishnah. Rabbi Lezer Omer ha'oichel, if a fellow eats oichel, food which is a rishon l'tumah, then he himself becomes a rishon. Rashi explains this is a tumah mid'Rabbanan. It's called tumas gevia when you eat a shir of two kibbetzim, a certain halacha which is discussed elsewhere. So he becomes like a rishon l'tumah regarding all matters. If he eats food which is a sheni l'tumah, he also becomes a sheni. Shlishi, he becomes a shlishi. You are what you eat. That's Rabbi Lezer's opinion. Rabbi Shua, no. You go a step down. The food is more strict than the person. If the person eats even rishon, he turns into a sheni. A rishon or a sheni, either one. The eater is merely a sheni. Now, how do we explain the second part? If he eats a sheni, why does it turn into a sheni? How's that consistent with the first part, which sounds like it's always downgraded? The Gemara later will discuss this. The final halacha is shlishi. If he happens to eat food which is considered a shlishi l'tumah, very weak tumah, and we're talking about chulin material. Now, how could chulin become a shlishi? We know that chulin stops at sheni, so we'll see in a minute. We're talking about chulin, which is being treated like truma, which has shlishi, so the chulin as well follows that track, follows that system. However, since it was only guarded as though it's truma, which is sort of a lower level guarding, lower level standard, so relative to karbanis, we treat it like it's tamei. Very tamei. In other words, we treat it as though it's a sheni l'tumah, even though it appears to us that's only a shlishi. So with respect to interaction with karbanis, with kodesh, we treat the food as though it's a sheni, and if a person who eats it, likewise, he turns into a sheni. So again, shlishi, if he only ate shlishi, he turns into a sheni with respect l'kodesh, with respect to kodesh, ve'ein sheni l'truma, but not with respect to truma activities. Because with respect to truma, we treat it as though he only ate a shlishi, which makes him unfit. Makes him like a shlishi, unfit for eating truma. Okay, in any case, let's infer. Rabbi Shua referred to chulin, which was treated like truma, which tells us that that's the maximum. You can't upgrade it further. You can't artificially, treat chulin like it's kodesh. Apparently, he doesn't hold it as concept. He holds it's too far, too exaggerated. Rashi says, "Batla daita." It's just a person who does that. It's unusual type of sort of exaggerated, standard that he's applying to chulin. So we don't reckon with that. Altaras chulin truma in. Yeah, you can take chulin and treat it like truma. Altaras hakodesh, but not like kodesh. Because he holds, there's no such a concept. Chulin shenas altaras hakodesh, even chulin that was treated and guarded as though it's karbanis, it's irrelevant. Less buhu shlishi. It's not treated like kodesh that has the concept of shlishi l'tumah. It doesn't. So clearly, Rabbi Shua puts a limit on this artificial upgrading system. You can upgrade it to truma, but not to kodesh. Hence, our Mishnah, which must be based on the concept of chulin that is being treated like kodesh, will not be going like Rabbi Shua. Ask the Gemara, why do we have to tie ourselves down? For Loikma, we can easily learn our Mishnah in a way which is consistent with Rabbi Shua as well. Return to the next Amud, because even Rabbi Shua agrees that you could take chulin and treat it like truma and give it that standard. So perhaps that's the case of our Mishnah. Why do we have to upgrade it all the way to Kodesh, not like Rabbi Shua? Perhaps our Mishnah is speaking about chulin that's being treated like truma. Rabbi Shua, and it's going like Rabbi Shua. And therefore, unclean hands, unwashed hands, which are sheni, will affect truma. Likewise, the animal in our Mishnah, which is treated like truma. Says the Gemara, you're right, but practically, it doesn't seem like our Mishnah is going with that. Why? So it's like that. You can't entertain that notion. Why? The Tanya, the boss, the Mishnah is talking about meat. Who treats meat like truma? There's no truma meat. Right? The whole point is to guard yourself one step ahead, right? To treat your regular bananas like truma, lest you come to eat, real truma bananas that are right. So something of similar properties, it makes sense to treat accordingly, right? So you guard your chulin material as though it's truma, but meat is totally dissimilar from any truma material. There's no truma meat. The tani basar di'i betruma. We're speaking about truma standards that he's applying to his regular food. Basar mi'ika. Do you have basar by truma? So it's not a regular thing. Rashi says it's not ruggle. It's not something which is done, and perhaps it wouldn't even be obligatory to stick with that type of commitment. It's not a legitimate type of correlation. Elamai bekachim. Okay, so what are you telling me? That the Mishnah is speaking that he's treating this chulin like kachim, right? And that makes more sense because it's similar material. It's meat and meat. So he's guarding his regular meat as though it's kachim meat. Well, once again, there's similarity here. Chaya. The Mishnah speaks also about a chaya bekachim mi'ika. Would he have a chaya by kachim? So again, it's dissimilar. Why would he relate one to the other? Well, it's still meat. Meat is meat. Basar bebasar michlap. One type of meat can be confused with the other type of meat. So it makes sense that he's guarding his regular meat as though it's kachim meat. So it shouldn't come to, but basar repaired like michlap. Nobody switches meat. Nobody confuses meat with fruit, with produce. So that would not be, a proper approach in terms of understanding the Mishnah. Okay, so bottom line, according to the second approach, right, the question was, what's the issue with the hands in the Mishnah? If it's chulin aren't affected by unclean hands. We're talking about either risha and the tumah hands, which can affect chulin, like Rabbi Lezer Shimon, or regular hands, which are yud shniyos. But shein l'tumah can affect truma, and likewise, we're talking about chulin that's being guarded, treated, upgraded, as though it's kachim. In which case, they're susceptible to shein l'tumah, barring the fact that in this particular case, there's no issue. Because there was no blood, in which case the basar is immune to any tumah. Okay, we'll continue with Hashem tomorrow. All the best to you and Hatzlacha.